You have surely heard the name Heracles. His name has been spoken for centuries. His labors were remembered, rewritten, retold again and again. Yet behind the glory lies something else, a shadow of pain, guilt, and an impossible choice. In this story you will learn how Heracles was born as the result of a divine deception, how still in his cradle he defeated death by strangling serpents, why he killed his teacher right in the middle of a lesson, how he lost his family, not on the battlefield, but at home, slain by his own hand, how the 12 labors became not feats of glory, but punishment and redemption. You will hear how he fought creatures no one else dared even to name, how he went beyond the edge of the world, how he descended into the underworld, and returned. Share your ideas for future videos in the comments and hit that subscribe button. New bedtime stories come out here daily. Long ago, in the shadow of the tall Theban walls, there lived a woman named Alcmene. She was born in Thebes, of royal blood, descended from Perseus. She was known not only for her beauty, but also for her steadfast spirit. When her husband Amphitryon, a hero and general, departed for war to avenge the death of his kin, Alcmene swore that she would not allow him to return to her until he had fulfilled his vow. She remained faithful even as weeks passed, then months, and no news came. Her resolve came to the ears of Zeus himself. The thunder god, who more than once had seduced mortal women, was drawn not so much to her beauty as to her unyielding will. One night, he assumed the likeness of Amphitryon, telling her that he had defeated his enemies and returned home. With the help of the gods, he stretched that night into 3 days. On the next morning, the real Amphitryon came back. When the truth was revealed, it became clear that Alcmene was expecting 2 children, one from her husband, the other from the god. Hera, wife of Zeus, was once again humiliated. To avenge herself, she delayed Alcmene's labor and hastened the birth of another woman who was expecting a son, Eurystheus. Thus, he came into the world before Heracles, and according to prophecy, became the rightful heir to rule over many lands. Heracles was born later, though he was the son of Zeus himself. After Heracles and his brother Iphicles were born, Hera tried to kill the infant. She sent 2 serpents into their chamber. Iphicles screamed and crawled away, but Heracles, though unable to walk, seized the snakes with his bare hands and strangled them. It was clear even then, this child was no ordinary being. He bore a strength that could not be explained. His childhood was filled with lessons. Amphitryon brought him the finest teachers of Hellas. Music and letters he studied under Linus, the brother of Orpheus. Wrestling and archery he learned from the wise centaur Chiron, javelin throwing from Eurytus, chariot driving from Castor. Yet Heracles had little patience for skills that did not match his nature. Music bored him, and gentleness seemed weakness. The lyre irritated him, as did the voice of his teacher, as did the notes he was forced to repeat. One day, when Linus reproved him, Heracles, in a burst of rage, seized the lyre and struck his teacher's head. Linus died on the spot. At the trial, Heracles declared he had acted in passion, and he was spared punishment. But Amphitryon understood. The boy could not be confined within palace walls. He was sent to the countryside to grow among peasants and nature, far from those unable to endure his fury. In the village, he quickly became a local hero. He protected flocks from wolves, caught bandits, aided the elderly, and at village festivals he triumphed easily in wrestling and races. When he grew older, he was called into military campaigns. He became renowned in the war against the Minyans, where he helped Thebes win. In gratitude, King Creon of Thebes gave him his daughter Megara in marriage. It was a union founded on respect and thankfulness. They had several sons, and for the first time in his life, Heracles felt that one could live not in battle, not in fear, but in peace. But happiness did not last. Hera, waiting for her moment, struck again. She sent madness upon him, not a passing fury, but a thick fog that consumed his mind. Heracles no longer recognized faces, no longer knew who was family and who was foe. In this state, he seized his weapons and killed his children. Some say he also killed Megara. Others claim she survived and was given later to another man. When the madness lifted, Heracles saw blood, saw bodies, but heard no accusations. No one dared say aloud what he had done, but all withdrew from him. He remained alone, burdened with a guilt that could never be washed away. He left the city and went to Delphi, to the temple of Apollo. He did not ask for forgiveness. He asked for a path. The oracle, speaking with the voice of the Pythia, told him, to cleanse himself, he must complete 12 trials. The labors would be set by King Eurystheus, ruler of Tiryns, the very man whom Hera had made firstborn at birth. Eurystheus did not act from justice, but from fear. He knew who Heracles was and hoped the trials would destroy him. Each task was chosen with death in mind, battles with monsters, deeds too perilous even for gods. The first was the Nemean lion, a beast whose hide no blade could pierce, whose jaws could bite through bronze. Thus began the cycle of labors in which Heracles would have to do more than survive. He would have to transform himself. The first task Eurystheus gave Heracles seemed deadly from the outset. He was to go to the land of Nemean, a region abandoned, where no one dared hunt, where paths were overgrown, where villages lay deserted. People had fled because in the caves of the Nemean valley there lived a lion unlike any other creature, enormous, ferocious, and above all, invulnerable. Its hide could not be cut by sword, pierced by spear, or pierced by arrows. No hunter ever returned alive. Even when wounded, the beast seemed not to feel pain. Heracles knew this would not be a hunt in the ordinary sense. It would be a trial where brute strength alone might fail. He did not take an army, as others might have. He went alone, carrying only a bow, a sword, a club of his own making, and silence. When he entered the Nemean valley, evening was falling. Everything there felt strange, the air heavy like before a storm, the trees lifeless, no bird song. The lion's traces were everywhere, broken branches, gnawed bones, tufts of fur. Heracles did not hurry. He knew the beast would appear, sooner or later, yet he did not expect it so soon. A low growl came from a ravine, and moments later the lion rose on a rock opposite him. It was as large as a bull. Its eyes gleamed in the dim light, its hide thicker than any ox's. Heracles drew his bow and loosed an arrow. It struck the chest, but did not pierce. The lion flinched, then roared louder. A second arrow hit its flank, again without effect. Heracles dropped the bow, drew his sword, and rushed forward, but steel slid across its body as if against stone. The lion struck with its paw, hurling Heracles back. In that instant he understood. Only bare hands could prevail. He waited for the beast to spring again. Dodging, he seized its neck, pressed it to the ground, and began to choke it. Long they struggled. The lion thrashed, clawed, tore the air, but Heracles held fast. He was no man in that moment, but force itself, a shadow of fury, an immovable rock. At last the beast grew weak, then still. Its hide remained intact. No ordinary knife could skin it. So Heracles, as the tale goes, used the lion's own claw to cut away the pelt. Only the creature itself could reveal its secret. He placed the hide upon his shoulders, not from pride, but because it might serve him. He returned to Tiryns alone, just as he had departed. Eurystheus, hearing the report through a servant, refused to see him face to face again. From then on, Heracles was to announce his triumphs from afar. The labor was accepted, more awaited. Heracles did not question. He simply awaited the next command. The second labor was no less perilous, but far more complex. If the Nemean lion was a fortress of flesh, the Lernaean Hydra was already almost a myth. Such beings do not live in the ordinary sense. They spread, grow, multiply, filling cracks and voids like a living disease. The Hydra dwelt in the swamps near the city of Lerna, a damp, rotting place shrouded in mist, where the ground seemed warm, not from the sun, but from something festering below. According to stories, the Hydra had 9 heads, but those who saw it swore there were more, perhaps 10, perhaps 20. But the number was not the true terror. The curse was that whenever one head was cut, 2 more grew in its place. and one head was immortal. It could not be slain, destroyed, or touched by time or weapon. Its venom was so deadly that even its breath poisoned air, water, earth. Wherever it passed, grass blackened, birds dropped dead mid-flight. Heracles went to Lerna knowing brute strength alone would fail. He took with him his nephew, the young Iolaus. Rarely did he allow company, but here he did. The boy was no warrior, but clever, quick, and calm. Heracles knew against such a creature one strike, even the strongest, would not suffice. They would need swiftness, unity, relentless pace. When they reached the swamps, the air grew heavy, breathing was hard, and a gray mist cloaked everything. The trees twisted, roots rose from the ground, the soil squelched beneath their feet. Soon, they found the lair, a fissure in the earth, from which thin vapor rose. Heracles cast a burning torch into it, and waited. At first silence, then movement. From the dark cleft the Hydra slid forth. Its body stretched endlessly, wider than any serpent's. Necks writhed like serpents themselves, each bearing eyes, fangs, eternal readiness to strike. It did not leap at once. It studied. Then it lunged. The battle began instantly. Heracles struck, severing a head. At once two sprouted in its place. Another blow, another doubling. With each heartbeat the heads multiplied. They hissed, bit, coiled around him. He knew his strength would drain before victory. He called to Iolaus. The boy was ready, holding a burning branch. Each time Heracles cut, Iolaus pressed fire to the wound. Flesh seared, the stump closed. No new heads grew. Together they moved as if rehearsed, one cutting, one cauterizing. Step by step, head by head, they reduced the monster, until only one remained. The last, the immortal, resisted both blade and fire. Then Heracles seized a boulder and crushed it with force beyond mortal. He pinned the head to the ground and pounded until it stilled forever. Then he severed it and buried it deep, covering it with stones. The Hydra was slain, but its venom endured. Learning from the battle, Heracles gathered its blood, thick, black, stinking of metal and death, and smeared it upon his arrows. From then on, every shot was fatal. No wound inflicted by that poison could be healed by prayer or potion. He returned to Tiryns, and again Eurystheus refused to meet him. The second labor was acknowledged, yet rumors spread. Since Heracles had not fought alone, the victory was unworthy. Eurystheus sought to diminish it, but neither he nor any dared openly contest the man who had slain a creature whose very breath killed trees. Heracles did not argue. He did not defend himself. He merely waited for the next trial. After the first two labors in which Heracles confronted monsters and death, Eurystheus chose to change tactics. He wanted to wear the hero down, not by battle, but by time. Thus the next task seemed at first glance less dangerous, yet no less difficult. Heracles was commanded to capture the Ceryneian Hind. This hind was no monster. On the contrary, it was regarded as an almost sacred creature. It lived in the wild forests of Arcadia, on the slopes of Mount Cerynea, and legends said it belonged to Artemis herself, the goddess of the hunt and of the woods. The hind had golden antlers and hooves of pure bronze. It did not attack, did not roar, did not destroy villages. It simply ran, faster than the wind, lighter than a shadow. No one had ever managed to overtake it, and whoever tried either perished or lost the path and wandered the mountains for weeks. Heracles understood that this would be a different kind of labor. No strength was needed here. The club would be useless, and even the bow would fail him. The hind could not be killed. The goddess Artemis would not forgive it. It had to be taken alive, unharmed, with full respect for what it was. That meant no haste, no noise, no surrender to anger, only patience, endurance, and care. He set out for Arcadia alone. No weapons, no companions, no elaborate schemes. Only a hunter's cloak, provisions, and the knowledge that the road could take months. And so it did. Heracles pursued the hind for almost a whole year. He tracked it by hoofprints in the morning dew, by the faintest bends in the grass, by tiny wisps of hair on the branches. Sometimes he saw it far away, the golden antlers flashing back the sun, so that for a moment it seemed a mirage. He never tried to close the distance too quickly. He knew that a single rash movement would mean beginning again from the start. He passed through dense woods, forded rivers, climbed mountains, and descended into valleys once more. At times it felt as though he was not chasing the hind at all, but following time itself, following nature, which does not allow itself to be caught. People in the villages stopped asking why he walked. They began to understand. This was no hunt. It was almost a pilgrimage. One early morning, when the air was still cold and the grass was sheathed in frost, he saw that the hind had stopped by a brook. For the first time it did not flee at once. It drank, then raised its head, looking toward him, yet did not move. Perhaps it was tired. Perhaps it accepted him. Or perhaps the moment had simply come. Heracles did not shout and did not run. He approached slowly, without sudden gestures. He knew trying to seize it with bare hands would be hopeless. Instead, he drew his bow, not to wound, but to graze the tendon of a leg ever so slightly. The arrow was light, like a needle. The hind started but did not fall. It stumbled, lost its rhythm, and then Heracles came closer and gently took it by the neck, holding it steady. He did not use force. He merely maintained his grip, as one holds one's breath. He bound the injured leg with soft cloth and began the journey back, on foot, with the hind beside him, not on a tether but as if walking with an equal. They went slowly, paused for rest, and all that time, the hind did not try to escape. It was as though it understood that everything was already decided. As Heracles neared Mycenae, Artemis appeared before him. She was not wrathful. She did not threaten punishment. But her gaze was cold. She knew the hind was hers. Heracles did not justify himself. He explained that the labor was not of his own will, that he had harmed no one, and that he had done everything to preserve the hind's life and dignity. The goddess listened, and she let him go. She allowed him to show the catch to Eurystheus, but only for a moment, to prove the labor complete. After that, Heracles was to release the hind back into the Arcadian forests. So he did. He brought it to the gates of Tiryns, showed it to the king, and without waiting for a word, loosed the binding and set it free. It ran off, lightly, as if all this had been only a dream. The wound healed. Almost no trace remained. And once again Heracles was left with empty hands, but with the task fulfilled. Eurystheus was displeased. He had hoped the hind could not be caught, and that Heracles would return empty-handed. But he returned, in silence, without triumph, without tales, only with what had been done. This was the third labor, not bloody, not noisy, not heroic in the usual sense. Yet perhaps it was the first in which Heracles began to understand that strength is not always a blow. Sometimes it is a step back, a pause, and quiet. The fourth task once again demanded a hunt, not for a marvel, but for a threat. Unlike the hind, which had to be taken with caution and reverence, the Erymanthian boar was a coarse, destructive, blood-marked creature. It dwelt in the mountains of Arcadia, on the slopes of Erymanthus, and for many years it had terrorized the local people. The boar was enormous, by most accounts larger than any wolf or even a horse, as massive as a bull. Its tusks could split a tree, its bellow could be heard for many miles, its tracks dented even stone. It attacked herds, ruined crops, overturned carts, and sometimes houses. Villagers fled in panic when they heard that the beast had come out of the forest once more, and any who tried to stop it died, most often too quickly to tell anything about it. Heracles set out alone again. He already knew that companions were useless. When the quarry can kill with a single toss of the head, a crowd becomes a burden. He climbed into the high country, where the air grew cold, the trees low, and snow lay on the paths even in the months when the fields below were still in bloom. On the way, he stopped at the home of the centaur Pholus, a wise, gentle being who lived far from noisy roads. Pholus welcomed Heracles as a guest, offered food, and opened a clay jar of wine. Heracles did not know the wine was communal, meant for all centaurs. Its fragrance spread through the hills, and soon other centaurs appeared at the threshold, stirred up, irritated, quickened by the scent of wine, and by the thought that it had been opened without leave. A quarrel broke out. Heracles, defending himself and his host, was forced to take up arms. He did not wish to kill, but the situation slipped beyond control. Some centaurs fell, others fled into the mountains. Among the wounded was Chiron, the immortal mentor of Heracles himself, accidentally struck by a poisoned arrow. Though Chiron did not die, the pain of the wound remained with him forever. It was one of those tragedies that cannot be undone. After this, during his labors, Heracles no longer touched wine. He continued upward. The higher he climbed, the quieter the world became. The boar's tracks were deep, and snow that melted by day froze again at night, turning the trail into a slick and treacherous way. He found the beast on a ridge, rooting through the drifts, its great head lowered in search of food. Heracles did not rush to fight. He waited. When the boar saw him and charged, Heracles gave ground, drawing it ever higher toward a narrow mountain cleft. With each moment, the boar plunged deeper into snow, slipped, and lost its footing. At last it skidded, and then Heracles sprang forward, seized the tusks, looped a rope around them, and threw the creature down. This was not a brawl so much as a contest with mass and fury. He did not kill it. He knew the task was not to destroy, but to capture. The boar fought for a long time, but it was subdued. Heracles bound it tight, hoisted it upon his shoulders, and bore it down, through snow, over ice, all the way to Tiryns. The journey took more than a single day. Villagers came out to watch the hero carrying the monster and could not trust their eyes. They expected it to break free and fall upon them at any moment, but it did not move. It was overcome. When Heracles reached the palace of Eurystheus, the king peered out and instantly hid. He could not believe the beast had been taken alive. He ordered himself concealed and shouted that the boar be removed at once. Thus the tale spread that Eurystheus had a bronze jar dug for himself and would hide inside it whenever Heracles returned from a labor. The labor was counted. The animal was released far back into the mountains, where no one lived. Heracles did not ask what would become of it. He merely went back to his own quarters, with a new scar, with the memory of centaurs, and with weariness in his shoulders. Sometimes the heaviest burden is not the beast, but what happens on the way to it. The next task was different. There was no monster, no venom, no sacred animal that could not be harmed. There was filth, ordinary filth, in monstrous measure. King Eurystheus ordered Heracles to cleanse the stables of King Augeas. Augeas ruled Elis, a rich, fertile land famed for its herds. His stables housed thousands of bulls and horses. They had not been cleaned for decades, by some accounts for 30 years, by others even longer. Manure lay in layers, compacted by time, filling not only the stalls but also lanes, streams, and the surrounding fields. The stench carried for miles. People avoided Augeas's domain. But the king held that this was proper. The wealth of his herds, in his view, excused everything. The assignment was humiliating. Eurystheus hoped that a hero who had bested monsters would refuse to shovel filth. Or he would fail. Or he would simply give up and leave. But Heracles did not object. He accepted the task, as he had accepted all the others, without a word. Upon arriving in Elis, he did not announce who had sent him. He met with Augeas himself and proposed a bargain. He promised to cleanse all the stables in a single day, if the king would grant him 1/10 of the herds as his reward. Augeas, certain it was impossible, agreed. He smirked, like so many who had underestimated Heracles. He brought his own son as a witness, so that afterward the boy could attest to the manner of the hero's failure. But Heracles did not take up a shovel. He did not begin as others would have. He went to the nearest rivers, the Alpheus and the Peneus, and began to cut channels. He altered the courses of 2 streams at once. He led them through the stables, clearing a path for the waters. And within 1 day, the currents washed away what had accumulated over years. Manure, silt, dust, all went downstream, and the stalls stood clean as new. When Augeas saw the result, he was not pleased. He realized he had been outwitted. He refused to pay, declaring that the task had been accomplished by the river's will, not by the hero's hands. He drove Heracles away in disgrace, trying to portray it all as a misunderstanding. But the witness, his own son, affirmed that there had been a bargain. Then Augeas banished his son as well. Heracles did not argue. He returned to Tiryns and reported the labor complete. But Eurystheus, learning that the work had been done with the aid of rivers rather than by hand alone, declared that this labor could not be counted. He said that Heracles had received the assignment as a servant but had acted as a contractor. Even so, he continued to assign new trials. Later, no longer as part of the labors, Heracles returned to Elis. He led an army, defeated Augeas, and gave the rule to the king's son, the very one who had once told the truth. In honor of that victory, according to tradition, the Olympic Games were established. But then, after the cleansing of the stables, he departed in silence, without reward, without acknowledgement, with yet another labor that no one wished to reckon. And yet the task was done. Stables befouled for decades were made clean in a single day, and it was accomplished not by the gods, not by an army, not by coercion, only by reason and by the river. The 6th labor brought Heracles to Arcadia, to Lake Stymphalian. At first glance the place seemed peaceful, a calm sheet of water, forests along the shore, hills sloping to the edge. But those who lived nearby knew. The lake did not belong to men. Birds had settled there that none dared to name. People avoided them, whispered about them, and fell silent when they appeared. The Stymphalian birds were not merely predators. They had iron feathers, sharp as arrowheads. When they rose into the air, the feathers shed from their bodies and fell, piercing whatever lay beneath. People, livestock, trees, the roofs of houses. Their cries were deafening, like the clash of a great gong that left the ears ringing. They attacked in flocks, and no one could stand against them. Arrows did not cut through the dense plumage, nets tore, and fire only enraged them. People abandoned their homes, fields went to weeds, and the lake grew ever emptier, ever more dead. Heracles arrived at the beginning of autumn. The forest stood dull, the grass was burnt out, and the water showed not even a hint of ripple. The silence did not promise peace. It warned. He saw the birds lurking among the reed beds and in the lakeside trees. They did not take wing unless they sensed a threat. Heracles knew that shooting from the ground would be useless. He had to force them to fly. He circled the lake, studied the land, and found an old tower where, according to tales, fishermen had once lived. There he discovered bronze clappers, strange instruments forged by the god Hephaestus. Legend held that they had been made for this labor in particular. The sharp, rending din they produced was unbearable to the Stymphalian birds. Heracles tied the clappers at his belt, climbed a crag above the lake, and began to beat them, louder and steadier until the noise filled the valley. The birds burst into the sky. There were many, black, gleaming like spearheads with burning eyes and the metallic hiss of wings. They wheeled over the lake, hesitant to strike at once. But when they began to rain down feathers, a storm of steel, Heracles bent his bow. His arrows were poisoned with the blood of the Lernaean Hydra. He aimed carefully and did not rush. Each shaft flew true, bringing down one bird after another. Those that did not fall fled in terror, far beyond the mountains, and never again returned to those shores. When the battle ended, the water lay calm once more. The ground around the lake was strewn with birds. Heracles descended, gathered their feathers as proof of his work, and left without waiting for fear to creep back into that place. He knew that a single survivor could be enough to summon the flock again. Back in Tiryns, he laid the tokens before Eurystheus, who did not argue this time. He merely marked the tally. Another labor completed. On the surface it looked like a hunt, but Heracles understood that this was a labor of sound, of patience, of the right moment. He had not rushed in. He waited until the birds showed their weakness, and when they did, he acted swiftly and with precision. Sometimes danger does not meet your gaze. It hides in the branches. Then you must draw it out, with noise, with light, with the silence between the blows. The seventh labor sent Heracles across the sea, to the island of Crete, to King Minos. Eurystheus ordered him to deliver alive a wild bull that had thrown the whole island into terror. The bull was not a monster from legend. It did not breathe fire and had no venomous fangs, yet its appearance was taken as a sign of a curse, and everyone who saw it said that what shone in its eyes was not anger, but madness. According to the tales, this bull rose from the sea. Poseidon had sent it, a gift to King Minos, a token of support for his rule. Minos was supposed to sacrifice it. But when the bull came out of the waves, white, gleaming, strong, and beautiful, the king would not destroy it. He hid it and sacrificed an ordinary bull instead. Poseidon grew wrathful. From that day, the gift of the sea became a curse. The bull would no longer obey. It fled, wrecked fields, smashed fences, trampled people. No herdsman could stop it. The king forbade anyone to approach it and even to speak of it. Heracles arrived on Crete without guards, without warning. He went straight to Minos' court and demanded access to the bull. Strangely, the king did not object. Perhaps he was glad to be rid of a problem he himself could not solve. He pointed out where the beast had last been seen and did not interfere further. Heracles headed into the foothills, to the plains where the royal herds had once grazed. Locals showed him shattered pens, splintered trees, charred fragments of wagons. He did not track the bull at once. It took several days before he found it, grazing alone at the foot of a hill. To the eye, the bull was magnificent, powerful, muscular, with thick white coat and horns that glittered like polished iron. Yet there was tension in its movements. It did not graze. It kept watch. It felt a presence. When Heracles stepped forward, the bull raised its head and charged. The impact was mighty. The ground trembled beneath its hooves. But Heracles did not dodge. He met the rush, seized the bull by the horns, and the struggle began. This was not a fight to the death. He needed not to kill, but to hold. The bull reared, struck with its hooves, tossed its head, but the hero stood fast. He did not try to crush the animal. He simply did not let go. Little by little, by effort, by breath, by exhaustion, the bull began to yield. There was nowhere to go, only slopes, the sea, and a man who would not give way. Heracles cast a rope over it, bound the horns, kept the body under control, and led it down to the shore. A ship was waiting there. No one believed the beast would step onto the deck, but the bull was calm by then. It no longer tore free, perhaps because it had recognized a strength equal to its own. Or perhaps it was simply tired. They crossed the sea. Waves rocked the vessel, wind whistled in the rigging, but Heracles kept the rope in hand. He sat beside the bull, silent, still, one hand on its horns, and the bull did not move. When they reached Tiryns, Eurystheus, as usual, did not come out to meet him. He ordered the creature gotten rid of at once. The bull was released, and by one account soon appeared in Attica, where later Theseus would slay it. By another, it vanished, dissolving into the mist of a pre-dawn landscape, as if it had returned to the sea from which it rose. Heracles did not object. It was enough that the labor was done. There was less blood in this feat, but no less strain, and in a sense, more respect. Sometimes an enemy is not something to be destroyed, but something to be understood, to be held, to be outlasted. With each new task, it became clearer. The labors of Heracles were not only about strength, they were a constant encounter with whatever had broken the natural order. What should have been peaceful and useful became perilous. A lion that should not have been invulnerable. A bull meant for sacrifice that turned into a curse. And now, mares that were no longer herbivores. Heracles was commanded to go to Thrace, the edge of the Greek world, land of the Bistones, ruled by King Diomedes. This ruler did not honor the gods, did not respect people, and did not fear blood. He kept in his palace 4 horses that he fed not with hay, but with human flesh. These mares were as savage as predators. They tore victims apart right in the stalls. Their neighing sounded like a howl, and their hooves left deep dents even in stone. They were not tethered. They were chained with bronze. Diomedes held them as the emblem of his power. He believed that as long as they lived and were sated, no one could challenge him. Heracles came to Thrace with a band of companions. It was a rare exception. He knew he could not simultaneously fight, scout, and guard captured animals alone. Landing on the shore, he went straight to Diomedes' palace where the mares were kept. There, in stone pens stinking of death, he saw them, great in size, with black coats, bloodshot eyes, and yellow teeth. They sensed he did not fear them, and yet they watched. Heracles and his companions loosed the chains, slipped on bridles, and began to lead the mares away from the palace. They moved slowly, under strain, for the mares submitted only with difficulty, constantly wrenching free, biting, striking with hooves. Still, the plan held, until Diomedes appeared with a troop of warriors. He had no intention of surrendering his horses without a fight. Battle flared. Heracles ordered his companions to drive the mares onward while he stayed to hold off the pursuit. The clash was fierce. Diomedes was strong, but Heracles had greater skill. He prevailed, and not only prevailed, he took the king alive. Then he made an unexpected choice. He fed Diomedes to his own mares. This was neither revenge nor cruelty. It was balance. Beasts raised on blood had to be fed the hand that fed them. And what no one foresaw occurred. Sated with their master's flesh, the mares grew calm. Their frenzy vanished. They no longer tore and bit. They followed like ordinary animals. Heracles returned with them to Tiryns. The mares no longer attacked. Eurystheus, astonished, ordered that they be dedicated to the goddess Hera. By other versions, he released them, and they faded into the mountains, their savagery spent. There is yet another legend, that these very mares later came to Alexander of Macedon, and that one of them became ancestress to his beloved stallion, Bucephalus. The labor was completed, not in fire, not in blood, but by restoring a balance. Heracles did not simply subdue the beasts. He cut the tie between the evil and the one who had bred it. Sometimes to end fury, you need not a weapon, but an ending to the story that gave the fury birth. When Heracles returned to Tiryns after the previous feat, he had no time to rest. A new task was already prepared. Eurystheus commanded him to obtain the girdle of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. This was not mere ornament, but a symbol of authority and valor. Ares himself, the god of war, had given it to her. For the Amazons it signified the right to command, to decide, to lead others into battle. The Amazons lived far away, on the shore of the Black Sea, in a land where a Hellenic foot seldom trod. They were not called enemies, yet no one called them friends either. They were a people apart. Women warriors who did not take husbands, who needed no protection, who lived by their own laws. Heracles did not know what to expect. This task differed from the others. He would have to bargain, or to take. Perhaps both. He sailed with a small expedition. On the way, the ship put in at cities where Heracles was already known. He was received with respect, though warily. People spoke more and more of how he fought and won, and also of how he was changing. His journeys began to look less like service and more like something else, and more dangerous. When he reached the Amazons' capital, he was met not with weapons, but with questions. Hippolyta herself came out to him. She wore no armor, rode no horse. She came in simple dress, the girdle at her hips, without fear and without any interest in war. She listened to his request. He spoke plainly. The girdle was not for him, but a means to fulfill a command. She looked at him, long, as though searching out the core, and then said she would give it. Heracles did not expect this. For the first time in all the labors, the task might be completed without battle. He remained in his camp, awaiting Hippolyta with the girdle. Amazons came and watched. Some spoke with his companions. All was quiet, until a different wind rose from the sea. There are several versions of what happened next. In one, Hera decided to interfere and spread among Heracles' men a rumor that the Amazons were preparing an attack. The men took fright and raised an alarm. The Amazons answered. Fighting began. In another version, it was Eurystheus himself who secretly sent warriors to disrupt the peaceful handover and provoke conflict. One way or another, everything changed in a single moment. A true duel sprang up between Heracles and Hippolyta. Perhaps she had not wished to fight, but she was compelled. Heracles was stronger. He overcame her, took off the girdle, and withdrew. Hippolyta's death, or her defeat, split the Amazons. Some rode off into the steppe, others swore vengeance. Trust was broken, and even if Heracles had not wanted it, it happened before his eyes. He returned with the girdle. Eurystheus received it as a trophy. The task was counted complete, and he did not care how it had been done. The girdle had been delivered. That was enough. But they say, Heracles kept long silence after that voyage. He did not tell the story, did not boast of victory, did not wear the token. For in this task he had not conquered a beast. He had lost the chance to do something differently. Sometimes what is given peacefully collapses because of fear, and sometimes because no one stopped a hand at the moment it should have been stayed. The next labor led Heracles beyond the familiar, beyond mountains, beyond seas, beyond the horizon. Eurystheus ordered him to seize the herd of bulls belonging to Geryon, a being who lived in the far west, beyond the ocean, at the very edge of the world. These bulls were famed for their strength and beauty, but reaching them was harder than winning any fight. Geryon was not a man, and not even a god in the usual sense. He was a three-bodied giant, fusing three natures into one. He had 3 trunks, 3 heads, and 6 arms, yet 1 heart and 1 will. He lived on the island of Erythea, guarded not only by the sea but also by a monster named Orthrus, a 2-headed hound as savage as his master. To reach Erythea, Heracles had to cross Libya and press ever farther westward, where no familiar cities remained, and the stars above shifted from their accustomed places. The heat was unbearable, the sun merciless. On one day, when the air seemed to melt and the earth to glow white-hot, Heracles halted, and in fury, drew his bow and shot straight into the sky, toward the sun. Tradition says that Helios himself, the sun god, marveled at such boldness. He did not grow angry. Instead, he gave Heracles a golden cup, a vast vessel in which the gods crossed the ocean to the night side of the world. With its aid, Heracles passed over the waters and reached the island where Geryon's herd grazed. Orthrus, the 2-headed hound, met him first. The fight was swift. The hero felled the beast with his club, denying it any chance to close. When the herdsman who watched over the bulls came at the noise, the same fate struck him. Heracles felt no malice. He did what was necessary. He loosed the bulls, gathered the herd, and prepared to withdraw. Geryon did not appear at once. He came when all was nearly done, not from fear, but because he knew that if there was to be a battle, there would be only one. He held 3 spears and 3 shields, and one design. The struggle was hard. Heracles darted among the 3 bodies, parrying blows while trying not to let the herd scatter. He knew that if he lost, not only he would die, but the purpose as well. Then he drew his bow, bent the string to the limit, and loosed an arrow steeped in the Hydra's venom. It pierced all 3 bodies at once. Geryon staggered and fell, slowly, as though the island's shadow were ebbing away. The herd submitted. Without herdsman, without hound, without master, they no longer resisted. Heracles ferried them back in the golden cup. The return was no easier. The herd kept breaking apart. Bulls grew stubborn. Some strayed and ran. In Italy, he was forced to halt and gather the scattered animals again. In Etruria, he fought with local brigands. In Thrace, men tried to cheat him, Yet in the end, he came back. When he drove the bulls into Tiryns, Eurystheus received them at once, and immediately ordered them sacrificed. The herd vanished as quickly as it had been delivered. Not a single bull remained with Heracles. From the labor there was only weariness, grains of sand clinging to his clothes, and the image of a fallen giant on a far shore. But Heracles did not complain. He had done what was commanded. He had crossed the world in breadth. He had fought the one who had 3 bodies, and having only one, overcame him. And then he simply went on. Sometimes the road does not lead to glory. Sometimes it merely leads onward. The 11th labor was unlike any of the earlier ones. Eurystheus ordered Heracles to obtain the golden apples from the tree that grew in the mysterious garden of the Hesperides. This task did not concern monsters in the usual sense. It concerned the garden's very location. No one could find it. It had no fixed place on any map. People knew of it, told stories about it, yet never reached it. It seemed to exist, not within space, but on the boundary between worlds. The garden of the Hesperides lay far to the west, beyond the ocean's rim, past the last cliffs. There, amid shade and the eternal whisper of leaves, stood a tree that Gaia herself had given to Hera on the day of her wedding to Zeus. Upon it hung golden apples, fruits of immortality. But to pluck them was impossible. They were guarded by the Hesperides, nymphs of evening, daughters of night. And there was also Ladon, the dragon coiled about the tree. He did not sleep, did not grow distracted, did not weaken. His eyes never closed, and one could hear his hissing long before reaching the garden. Heracles did not know where to go. He set out, and it was not a march, but a wandering. He crossed deserts, marshes, mountain ranges. He questioned sages, hunters, goddesses, spirits. In one version, it was then that he fought Antaeus, the son of Earth, who could not be defeated so long as his feet touched the ground. Heracles lifted him into the air and strangled him. In another version, he freed Prometheus, chained to a rock, and in gratitude, Prometheus showed him the way. At last he reached the world's edge, the place where day ends and night has not yet begun. There, among the crags, he met the Titan Atlas. Atlas held the vault of heaven upon his shoulders, not as a symbol, but literally. His body bent, his arms taut as cables, his gaze weary, yet calm. Heracles understood. This Titan alone would know how to reach the garden, for he was kin to the Hesperides. Heracles offered a bargain. He would bear the sky in Atlas's stead, if Atlas would bring back the apples. Atlas agreed. He passed the heavenly dome to Heracles, and it was not mere weight, but the pressure of time, the heaviness of stars, the slow breathing of the universe. Heracles stood beneath that burden, silent, without complaint, and waited. Atlas returned with the apples, but tasting freedom, he did not wish to lose it. He said he himself would carry the apples to Eurystheus, while Heracles should continue to hold up the sky. Then Heracles consented, but asked a favor, that Atlas take the vault for a single moment so he could adjust his cloak. Unprepared for the ruse, Atlas agreed, and in that instant, Heracles stepped away, took the apples, and left the Titan to his former task. He returned to Tiryns. Eurystheus did not know what to do with the fruits. In one account he feared their power and returned them to the gods. In another they vanished, as all things vanish that arrive without right. Heracles did not insist. To him the trophy was not the point. The journey was. He found what no one could find. He spoke with those who do not speak. He supported what no one else supports. And he did it, without the sword. Sometimes the hardest part is not killing the dragon, but understanding where its shadow begins. The final labor set before Heracles required neither the defeat of a monster, nor the capture of a hostile king, nor the seizure of a wild beast. He was to descend into the underworld and bring back Cerberus, the 3-headed hound who guards the boundary between life and death. The task seemed impossible not only because the creature was terrible, but because the road to Hades is a road of one direction. No living person returned without consequence. Before he began, Heracles went to Eleusis, where priests performed rites of purification over him. Without such rites, a living man had no right to approach the borders of the realm of the dead. Then he made for a cave at Cape Dineron, held to be one of the entrances to the Underworld. There, in the shadow where light was no longer light, the descent began. With every step the air grew colder and the sounds more muffled. The stones beneath his feet lost their warmth. The walls closed in. Soon he stood in a place where time could not be felt. It was not darkness, more the absence of everything to which a mortal is accustomed. There he met the souls, neither hostile nor welcoming. They simply were. Some stood by a lifeless river, some by a leafless tree. No one questioned him. No one followed him with their eyes. Heracles went on until the court of the king of the dead opened before him. Hades received him calmly. He knew why the hero had come and did not forbid it, but he set a condition. Cerberus could be taken only if Heracles subdued him without weapons, without sword, without club, without destructive force, only with his hands, only with his will. Heracles agreed. He went deeper still into the stillness, and at last he saw the beast. Cerberus stood by the stone gates. He had 3 heads, and vapor drifted from each mouth. His fur bristled, his tail was a serpent. With every breath he seemed to radiate not rage, but a pure anxiety mingled with something ancient, long lost, and motionless. Heracles approached with care. He did not shout, did not charge, did not seek a weak point. He knew that with such a creature one does not win by fighting. He waited for the hound to leap, and in that instant he seized the neck. He held on, not with fury, but with steadiness. Cerberus thrashed, growled, struggled with all 3 heads, yet Heracles did not release his grip. He did not strike, did not seek to dominate. He simply held until the hound understood that this was not battle, but will. And then Cerberus grew still. With Hades' permission, Heracles led the creature to the surface. People trembled when they saw him guiding the guardian of the dead. Citizens drew back. Eurystheus, catching sight of the hound from afar, hid at once within his palace. He asked for no details. It was enough that the task was complete. Cerberus had been brought alive. That was all. Afterward, as he had promised, Heracles returned the hound to the Underworld. He took nothing with him. He left no trace. He completed the labor and vanished from sight. With this feat, the path ended. 12 labors, each harder than the last. Heracles passed through forests, deserts, mountains, and even death, without losing his aim. He proved that boundaries exist only so long as we accept them. After completing the labors, he obtained his freedom. He was no longer a servant, yet he did not become a man who simply went back to his former life. He was still the son of Zeus, a man of uncommon fate, a name known in every Greek land. He had to keep living, and that life, as it turned out, was no less difficult than all his trials. He took part in new campaigns, fought in others' wars, aided besieged cities, prevailed where others met defeat. Kings invited him, enemies feared him. He married again, more than once. He had children. The story of Heracles came to its close. He had passed through 12 trials, each of which demanded not only strength but patience, clarity, and inner steadiness. He accomplished feats, fought monsters, traveled the world, contended with gods, lost, erred, and began again. He walked forward even when the road was unclear, when the goal felt alien, when pain became familiar. In the end, he did not become a god at once. He received no reward that could be carried away. He simply finished all that he was bound to do, and that proved to be enough.